Josh Kosnik, what's up, man?
How we doing, brother?
Good. I'm glad you got to get into the studio and join us today.
Come down and around Lake Kaganza, easy drive.
Quick drive for you. So, man, how was that Bear game this weekend?
We're going to talk about this on air now, too.
Being a Packer fan, I loved it. I know you were there and already complaining about the long snapper getting pushed on a little bit, but Carl Brooks got up in the air and got his middle finger.
You know what's going to happen, too? Well, it's interesting. It wasn't the two guys that plowed him over. It was the guy to the right that got his hand on the ball. Yeah. But the league will review it and say they got it wrong, but nothing will happen.
No.
The win's still going to stay the win. But as a Bears fan, you just come to expect misery.
It's still been 2,800 and whatever days since the Bears last beat the Bears, which is a long ass time when you think about it. And if we beat them, if the Packers beat the Bears January 5th, that'll push it. It'll be at least 3,000 days then at that point before they have another whack at it. So
we just expect especially against the Packers.
Yep.
What can go wrong will go wrong.
Yeah, 100%. How did you become a Bear fan?
Grew up, so I was born in Ottawa, Illinois, just on the river.
All right.
And then lived in Champaign and Peoria till I was 13, moved to Madison in 8th grade. Okay. So those loyalties were tied. So all Chicago sports and then Badgers.
I was going to say, but you're also a Badger fan because you have season tickets, right?
Yeah.
Season tickets. How'd you become a Badger fan then?
So interestingly enough, I was a U of I fan.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, because I was in Champaign. And it was just, I got to go in 8th grade and sit in the student section.
Okay.
And it was right at that 93, 94 when Alvarez has started winning.
Turned that whole thing around.
Yeah, turned it around. And I'm in the student section, the energy. We used to be able to throw marshmallows back then.
Okay.
And that got banned because some of the college kids would put pennies in them.
Right.
So that they would go further.
Yeah.
And then I think it was an Ohio State player that got hit in the eye. And they started banning that. That wasn't how I became. But like the fun and the atmosphere and just the whole Camp Randall experience.
Did your parents know you were in the student section as an 8th grader?
Yeah.
They signed you up for that? Said, hey,
I didn't get to go to any college parties before then. I
dropped you off for the day of the student section. Were they doing jump around back then?
Oh, yeah. No, not jump around. But they had a bunch
jump
of
around started in like the late 90s, didn't it?
Late
97
90s,
or something like that, I think it starts.
Yeah.
It's like a 28-year tradition, 27-year tradition. So
yeah, it was a good time though.
So you got, how long you had season tickets for?
Well, so we had regular seats when the south end zone got redone. We got those on the field box,
which was just 2 years ago.
This is our third season in that box.
Okay,
it got delayed a year by COVID.
It's like on the field. That's a sick spot. Where I've seen some of your Instagram.
I have some friends that are in the suites up above.
Okay,
I like my box better.
Yeah, for sure.
The Oregon Duck came over and tried to steal my wife's sandwich.
You're
the second best mascot.
You're like a part of the game. You're part of the energy level right down there on the field. You're hearing what the players are hearing within that side of the field and in that end zone. So that's sweet. Man, it's too bad that they couldn't beat Oregon the other night. They were so close. They had them right there. Yeah.
It was a great game to watch. I thought we were going to get blown out.
A lot of my buddies did. A lot of my buddies like, should we get tickets or not? Because I don't know if you know, like you could have gotten some of the cheap seats for like $30. So some of my friends were like, should we get these or not? Should we just go like way up top? So, but even like there's even some decent seats for only like $175. Where I'm like, dang, like it's a good deal for number one coming to town. But I think. Yeah. A lot of people thought, there's potential for rain, and I think a lot of people thought it was just going to be a blowout.
The stadium was packed. The energy was great. Yeah. Student section stayed the whole time.
Yep.
Which doesn't always happen because they want to get back to their parties.
100%.
And we had 45 recruits in the house. Yep. So for a night game at Camp Randall, even though we lost, I feel like it was a win.
What do you think about Fickle? Is he going to get it turned around, Coach Fickle?
Man, well, so I think Longo had to go.
Yeah.
He had to. We never saw any semblance of an air raid offense.
Yep.
Now we got to have a quarterback.
It was like 60% of the plays were like run RPOs, run pass option, which led the nation.
And frankly, if you go back to the Oregon game, we stop them. They had the ball, we stop them. We go on a 9-minute drive, just ground and pound.
Yep.
And then we didn't go back to that ground and pound the rest of the game.
They were getting tired.
They were done. You got a 9-minute drive, any defense is going to be tired.
They're exhausted.
And then they didn't go back and commit to the run again. It's like we have no identity. So Longo had to go. I don't know if Fickle's the problem or if it was truly Longo. I knew because I got to go to I went to the Packer Viking game and I was with one of their tech guys. And the tech guy said Longo refuses to use the headsets in the quarterback's ear. He does all hand signals.
I've seen him doing the hand signals. I didn't realize.
So that's why we were getting delay of games and stuff as well. Yeah, so
interesting.
Just
not
one
using
of those
the technology.
Things where got to use the modern technology.
I'm a believer in Fickle. I think he's going to turn it around.
He's done it at other places like Cincinnati. If you can win at Cincinnati, you can win at Wisconsin, but you got to commit to an identity.
Yeah. I mean, we had Penn State on the ropes. We had Oregon on the ropes. The Alabama game, our starting quarterback got hurt. But I mean, I just think, and that was kind of more of a blowout. But you look at the team a few years back, and I mean, against Penn State and Oregon, both of those games are probably blowouts. We're probably not even, and at least we're like in the ball game where those two could have. So I think he's taking the steps in the right direction. I mean, next year I think we'll tell a lot, but
yeah, we got to get a quarterback for God's sake.
Yeah, season tickets for the Badgers probably a little bit easier. We had last season for the Bucks. We had my family had 11 games for the Bucks in the BMO suite. I don't know if you've ever done that before, which is sweet. You walk in, you get your own entrance, you walk in, there's hardly any line. They have like 7,000 square feet of just straight buffets, mac and cheese everywhere, and you're right outside the locker room, so you can stand there. Like my kids, they're getting signatures from Bobby Portis and Giannis and everything as they're walking out, and so that's a sweet experience. Just a little bit harder to get over Milwaukee for 11 games, so we didn't renew it this year, but it was a sweet experience last year, and I'm actually okay. The way they're playing right now, I'm actually okay. We didn't renew it this year. They're struggling a little bit. I don't know if you pay attention to the Bucks, but
I do a little bit. I don't. So I'm a Bulls fan because I grew up in Illinois. And, it was the Michael Jordan era. But the Bucks and Bulls were never rivals. Right. So I'll root for the Bucks when they're not playing the Bulls.
Yeah, for sure. I love, man, sports. I love the like you said, like you were talking about your tickets. I'm also the same guy. Like in Lambeau, I would rather, and I know you're a Bear fan, but Lambeau. I have people all the time say, "Oh, you're gonna get a box." I've never sat in a box in Lambeau ever because I'd rather be out in the elements. I'd rather just you feel it, and just like you're kind of saying with your season tickets there that are ground level in the end zone there for the Badgers in Camp Randall. I 100% agree with you. I love. My favorite thing about those big events is just like that, the feeling you get there. Mm-hmm. It kind of takes me back to when I played and whatnot, but just the feeling, the anticipation, the loud cheers, the boos. I love the environment. It's my favorite
the shit
part.
Talk.
The shit talk. And I love it. It's my favorite part about it. So, you've what's been your biggest obstacle or headache ever in business?
I've had a lot of them.
What's the hardest you ever been kicked in the face, and how'd you turn around?
The hardest I got kicked in the face was getting sued by a former employee.
Okay.
And it was malicious. It was slander. It was all those things.
Yep.
What you find out about the legal system is it's interesting when someone can straight lie about you.
Yep.
And put you in incidents that you weren't even a part of.
Yep.
And and I sit there and I'm just trying to learn this because I had never been sued like that before. I'm like, so I can't sue him for defamation or slander? And they're like, no. It has to be outside the bounds of the case. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, he's lying.
Yeah.
How do you mean I can't defend myself in this? And that's just the way the legal system works.
Yeah, anyone can sue anybody for anything.
And it needs some reformation because in this instance, he hires an ambulance chasing attorney. Uh-huh. And the goal of the attorneys is to make money. It's not to necessarily win the case, it's to make money.
Right.
And so they drag it out as long as possible. So I hire a real attorney, not an ambulance chaser, because I'm defending my honor at that point. Right. And it's one of those things where you sit in meetings and the deposition was brutal. It was long. Yeah. He goes first and he's lying through his teeth the whole time. I wear this Whoop band. My average strain in a workout is 6.5. Yeah. Unless I'm running, I'm not a long distance runner, so then I'll spike to 13 or something. But a weights workout,
if you wear a Whoop app, it scores your based on heart rate, and just activity level and your calories burned and all that stuff. So it gives you a strain rating of 0 to 15 or something is the higher.
I think 20? It can go up to 20.
20, but something like that.
Very few people get that.
Yeah. And so your strain level.
My strain level during deposition, when I can't say a word and I'm listening to this person that I mentored, developed, cared up for, like all this different stuff, lie through his teeth about me. Like my strain that day I got out, keep in mind I'm sitting in a chair all day.
For sure.
It was 14.
Yeah. Well, it was a long, your heart rate was probably up and down and up a lot probably. And it was a lot of it, right? Yeah. So the stress on your body and you probably feel it too. You probably went home, you're probably freaking
just exhausted. Yeah. Just exhausted. So 2 years of battle with that, in the process, the company that I had represented, terminated me to get themselves out of the lawsuit. They had to buy me out.
Yeah.
But it was just a function. It was like getting stabbed in the front and then getting stabbed in the back. Thinking that this company was going to stick up for me because they knew it was a lie.
Right.
But they just wanted themselves out of the lawsuit entirely, so they terminate me.
You know, what you just said too, just coming off the election season, it's amazing how Trump has done what he's done and just keeps going. The amount of lawsuits that he's had to go through, and then on top of it, he's running a campaign and getting attacked there. Because I've been through the same thing of, you know, getting sued and all that stuff, and it's not fun, and depositions and all that stuff. And I mean, but this is a guy that had how many coming at him?
Right. Well, interesting you say that, because I didn't vote for Trump in 16.
Mm-hmm.
In 20, I really didn't want to, because I'm more independent libertarian than I am either.
So you voted
right
Hillary.
Or left. No.
Oh, okay.
I voted libertarian in 16.
Okay.
And I wanted to vote libertarian.
Well, I just automatically, this is probably bad, but anyone else that's on the ballot, I just automatically rule them out.
Yeah.
Because like, now, I think maybe going forward, things could change now, but like historically, you know, so like 2016, I'm like, okay, well, you know.
So I had a history. So when I was in the financial industry, I was lobbying for the financial industry and planning, because they're always trying to change tax codes on either life insurance or IRAs or whatever it may be. So we sent representatives, and I was one of those representatives for 6 years for the state of Wisconsin.
That'd be pretty interesting.
It was super interesting. But what I learned is they're two wings of the same bird. They'll lie right to your face.
You're right.
Both the right and the left.
Right.
It's just a deep state play.
Right.
And that's what Trump has broke up. So to your point, over the last 4 years, I've gained a ton of respect for him for all the shit that they've put at him and kept going forward. Mm-hmm. I was like, because what I had to go through versus what he's gone through in the last 4 years.
It's nuts.
Minuscule compared to what he's
the amount of resilience, the amount of like just balls and guts, and then you get shot at. Like on top of it, like it's insane. It's insane ways overcome. And so like I don't know how people can, at least even if you disagree with the opinion or whatnot, you know, maybe some of the people, like, I don't know, even if they disagree with them, I don't know how they can't say, like, man, the energy level that guy has, the resilience, and how can you not respect it? Because, and if you don't respect it, it's like, man, have you really gone through anything that is that tough then to be able to relate? Because it's insane.
I think there's a lot of people like me over the last 4 years, like even one of my best friends who voted Democrat his whole life, voted for Trump this year.
Yeah.
And he literally put it on Facebook, and he was like losing friends over it. They're like, how could you vote for this person? He's like, look, my mom is from Israel. Mm-hmm. He goes, what I've experienced and what I saw Trump do over the last 4 years, he listed out like a myriad of reasons that he chose to switch. Yeah. And he's like, he goes, I was blinded. Now I see.
Yeah, it's the same thing. A lot of my former college, teammates and stuff like that. I mean, there's a fair amount of them that, used to vote Democrat and flipped and everything this year. And, what's interesting too is the states that Trump didn't win were all, non-voter ID. So it's like,
did he lose any states?
Right,
we don't know.
Right. At what point, like what would the outcome have been there if you actually needed an ID? And now there's still things coming in, as far as votes coming in still for like House, Senate. And it's like, and they're all going blue. And it's like, how is that?
Well, just like Hubby here in Wisconsin with that vote dump in Milwaukee that went 99%.
Yeah.
I said that back in 2020. And that was one of the biggest things that I was like, this is like, how does anyone not see this?
Right.
Because even in Dane County, which we're in, is super blue, 26% on average goes red. Mm-hmm. Well, then how do you get a vote dump of 100,000 ballots that go 100% blue?
Right.
There should be 26%.
Happened in 2020, happened again to Hubby. I mean, I went to bed at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning after Trump's speech when I went to bed. And because I looked at Hubby and he was up at that point, 60,000. I'm like doing the math in my head. I'm like, well, wait, he should have this. And apparently, and I thought I made a mistake when I woke up the next morning because Baldwin beat him, right? And there was that dump that came in, but then Hubby kind of had the same questions.
And it went 99% blue.
Right.
99%.
Right.
And so even in Milwaukee, he was getting 20%. Yep. And then they also, I don't know how this is legal, they funded those two third-party, the DNC funded those two third-party candidates.
Right.
That took 70,000 votes from him.
Yeah. You had a Hubby event at your place.
Yeah.
Out there at the farm.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Senator Kennedy came, not RFK, but John Kennedy from Louisiana, who's hilarious.
Yeah.
And Senator Barrasso from Wyoming. And Tommy Thompson showed up.
That's
who's
sweet.
At 80 years old has just mountains of energy still. Yeah. It's crazy.
I got the invite for that. We were out of town that night. Or do we have soccer? We had soccer still going on that night, I think. But yeah, we were out of town, or I was busy. I want to be able to make that. It's a shitty excuse. I should have found a way to get there.
come.
You did?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And
I didn't show up to the
her.
first event, so I probably wasn't invited to the second event.
Well, that was put on by, so it was Trump Unity event.
Oh,
so
you didn't
was,
put that one on.
They put it on, and it was like, I think Republicans of Dane County plus the Log Cabin Republicans, which are the gay Republicans.
Yeah.
They put that on.
So did you actually host the event and put that whole thing together? Or was it one of the organizations just said, hey, can we have this at your place? Or
yeah, essentially they did it all.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
we had to supply the arena and the spot.
Yeah.
But they did it all. I got to, meet with private security. I got to learn about their world, talk to Tulsi one-on-one, who's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, I would vote for her.
That's sweet. And she's another one that, Democrat and
switch. And she explained there why she did.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, and for those of you listening, Josh has, well, I guess, how do you explain your compound that you got? It's pretty sweet.
I'll tell you what. So after that it was the lawsuit that, transition of my business, all that stuff happened. I'm getting recruited by all the financial industry, every single player, because we ran a very successful firm. And the easiest thing for me to have done would have been to recruit, like start my own firm or join another force and recruit my old advisors and build what I've been building for years. And for every time I took a meeting, just something didn't sit right in my stomach.
Yeah.
So I had to figure out, pray a lot with God, do a lot of reflection, and just figure, like, what is that? Like, that would be the easiest thing for me to do. Why do I not feel right about that? And so through prayer, reflection, it was, you've accomplished everything you set out to in that industry. It's time to do something different.
Yeah.
So I lean into,
you weren't meant to go build that again.
Yeah. So I created a really fancy T-chart. Anyone that doesn't know, you just draw a line down a piece of paper. And on the left side, instead of doing numbers or pros, cons, what I did was, what did I love about my previous job and that business and all that stuff? And what did I hate on the right side? And on the hate side was, or dislike, however you want to phrase it, was really compliance, HR, FINRA, the SEC, egotistical advisors.
Yeah.
Like certain stuff. And then on the left side, the love, like coaching, developing people, showing them visions that they, had inside of them, but they hadn't yet touched or seen yet. Recruiting, sales, stuff of that nature, developing those skill sets. I'm like, and I just asked the question, what if I could design a world that I just did that? And so I started leaning into coaching, speaking, building masterminds, bringing people together. And my wife's like, hey, I don't want you traveling all the time. We got 4 young kids. I said, that's fair. So I had a Field of Dreams moment. And if you build it, they'll come. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go look for 80 to 100 acres of blank land. And that same friend that I was telling you about that switched to voting for Trump this time, he was one of 2 people I told this vision to. And he goes, dude, have you seen this property? Pulls open his phone and shows me a video of this place, which is the place you visited.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, it's not even listed on MLS. It was marketed in Equine magazines and high-end stuff because they were trying to keep it off. And then he was trying to sell the LLC. So going to real estate to save on taxes, he was trying to sell and transfer the LLC instead of sell a property.
Yeah.
So I went out there. I go to visit, and they want me to sign an NDA. And I was like, I'm looking at a property. Why am I signing an NDA? Oh, the owner's just really private. Sounds good. But if I'm signing this, who's the owner? And he tells me it's the dude that built our first house.
Oh.
So like
it's a small world. All these things started aligning.
Like things started aligning and
whispering to you.
Yeah. And it's just, I was like, well, tell him to be here next time. And so he did. And I showed with him my vision. I told him, hey, look, so my negotiation with my former company took 6 months. This was so I was terminated June 16th. This was about September. We didn't close till December 29th on the negotiation of the exit. So I'm in the midst of this. I tell him what's going on. I was like, hey, there's money coming, but I don't know when. Like, this is already drug out longer than I thought. And he's like, I love your idea. He goes, how about we do a land contract? And I said, what?
Yeah.
And so we did a land contract, but coincidentally enough, I closed the business exit on December 29th, closed on the property December 30th. So it was real short term. I had him paid off in 6 months and got traditional financing. But it was just all these things started lining up for us to build that out. And so the property's 80 acres. There's a beautiful home, beautiful old historic barn that got restored that we can fit 150 people in for bourbon tastings, weddings, smaller weddings,
political events.
Well, the political events were up in the horse arena, which is 13,000 square feet. And we can do really large events there. We've held, 350 person weddings. Actually, those political events, one was 500 people, one was 700 people. That's awesome. They only used a third of the arena.
Where the hell did everyone park?
That front grass area.
Oh, yeah.
We just mowed that down, and there's tons of it. And so it has good drainage as well. So it just worked out great. So the idea really is to bring people out of their fluorescent lights and out from behind their computer screens and get them to come into a group or a leadership team meeting that I have, or board meeting, or whatever it may be, to get them to experience nature, get them to experience being out of their business so that they can work on their business, get them with their leadership teams to dive deep and do all sorts of fun stuff there. And so anytime anyone comes out, it's like, hey, what do you want to imagine? We've had yoga retreats in the barn because it's this old, beautiful Amish built barn, and we've had all different sorts of stuff. So anytime anyone comes out, it's like, what do you want to imagine? And let's build that.
That's awesome. So is that business off to a good start for you? It's been
starting a
couple years.
So it's been a couple of years. So the coaching and speaking, all that's going great. The masterminds are really building momentum.
Mm-hmm.
The land we can't market traditionally because
you can't market traditionally. What do you mean?
So we can't be on event sites, stuff like that, because the township that we're in is very anti-business. And they want the property to remain the way it is, which is fine because I want it to as well.
Right.
But there's this conflict there. And so they can't tell me I can't operate my business out of there. They just don't want signage, and they don't want it marketed like a business.
Which means what? You can't go to certain websites and market? Mm-hmm. How are they going to know if you're on certain websites?
They found out already.
God, that's crazy.
Yeah. So it's interesting. And I'll fight that battle at some point because we're doing some really cool things. In the horse arena, we have an equine therapist now that's renting space, and she's working with kids on the spectrum and adults with PTSD. We have this co-op program where the state's paying for certain adults on the spectrum to come and do farm work. Mm-hmm. I was like, so are you going to turn away all these great services that are impacting and helping society because you don't want a business out here?
Yeah.
We'll fight that battle probably in 2025.
Yeah. That's a bummer that they're putting up. It's crazy that, again, just people that want to delay progress or pull people down or for whatever reason. You see it all the time.
In 3.5 years that I've owned it, the land hasn't changed.
Yeah, it's never easy.
And it's not going to change. Yeah. We're going to keep it as pristine as possible because we want people to experience it.
Yeah. What type of coaching do you do? What's your typical? I mean, are you mainly helping people in financial services? Is it a wide range of businesses, or what's? So
one of the masterminds is financial services, just because I have 20 years of experience in that, and I haven't forgotten any of that knowledge, and I was very good at developing people. But the primary coaching that I'm doing is either leadership or systems and processes through EOS. So I found all business owners have two major problems: human development.
What's EOS for people that don't know?
So Entrepreneurial Operating System.
Okay.
I'll talk a little bit about that.
Is that a license you have to do that, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually, they changed it into a franchise deal. So there's only 2 of us in Madison that are qualified to teach it. So the leadership development is one big bugaboo for most business owners. So there's 2 major issues, 136 little issues underneath that for business owners. And so human development and the systems and processes. Leadership development I've always been good at. That's what I've grown up in, I fell in love with, and that's why I sold my individual financial planning practice to really take over the large firm, because I was finding more joy in developing others. That being said, when I got into this coaching space, what I realized is having worked for a Fortune 80 company, a lot of the systems and processes were done for me.
Right.
So in the entrepreneurial space, it's the wild, wild west. Yeah. And most entrepreneurs, just like you start with an idea and you start building, and then all of a sudden you need to hire someone, and then you need to figure out this SOP and this SOP. And
or, like me, you just start whatever, for me, it was always whatever the least resistance, wherever I had the least resistance, if I'm going from A to B and my company's growing, to accomplish that, I'm going to do whatever is the least resistant, which is not always the best as far as getting your standard operating procedures up and running, if that makes sense. So I know that was a big thing for me when we started growing and started hiring people around 2017, 2018, because I've done every role in our company, but I didn't really document what I was doing or how I was doing it or whatever. And I probably wasn't doing it the best way that I could be. And I was just doing it kind of, again, the easiest way. Cause I had so much,
by the seat of your pants.
I had so much on my plate, right? So it's like, what's the fastest, easiest way to get this accomplished and done? And let's move on. And so that kind of, that's actually what led me to end up hiring our chief operating officer in 2019, who now she's our CEO of Spalding Group, the management company. But was just because I'd hired all these people, but I was still acquiring and buying assets. So I wasn't really there leading them, and I didn't really have standard operating procedures. And I realized something had to change because a lot of things were breaking.
Yeah, so EOS is a system that conglomerates not just systems and processes, but people and vision, and really getting it down to the traction level where all the employees are rowing in the same direction that you want them to row in through that vision. So a lot of times what I find though, like when I was at the Fortune 80 company, I didn't have to choose my email, I didn't have to choose my calendar, I didn't have to choose my CRM, like all of that was chosen. You get into the individual entrepreneurial space and you're like, what is the best CRM to use? Yeah. And by the way, that answer is different depending on the sector of business that you're in. And so,
and potentially the size, and like a lot of
it's different. And then you may switch because you outgrow the one that you started with. Yeah. So it was interesting to learn all that. And I'm like, okay, I adopted EOS when I was with that big company, and I tried to do it on my own. And I'm confident in saying that I may have gotten 20% of it right, because I was too ADD to read the back of the book, Traction, and be like, oh, I could hire an implementer to come in and actually do this for me. I would have gladly stroked that check. For sure. For someone like me to come in and actually do that. But I didn't. So I went and hired an integrator, because I looked around my leadership table and was like, oh, all these guys think like me. No wonder we're just talking in circles in our meetings and not getting anything done, because we're all visionary thinkers. Which was good for being financial advisors, but not good for actually implementing and getting shit done.
And that's really where I fall too, is more the vision on I should put it this way, 80% of our business, I'm more of the vision, right? And that's why I hired the COO, CEO. But the other 20% of our business, I'm still kind of, I'm the vision and executing, right? I mean, our company's kind of broken into two now, with the investment arm, which buys the real estate, and then the management arm that manages the real estate. So on the investment side, I'm still doing I'm the visionary, but I'm also still the person buying the deals, putting the deals together, leading due diligence and all that stuff. But as far as the management end, I had to be visionary and get the task, get the, integrative is what they call it, right? Integrator.
Yeah. So
I had to get that portion. I had to get that portion off my plate, because there just wasn't enough time in the day. And I wasn't meant to be the CEO of a property management company. Yeah. Right.
So you're smart though, but because you're smart or get your ego out of the way, one of the two. Yeah. So I'll give you credit on that, because a lot of visionary, almost all entrepreneurs, and I'll say 80% are visionaries, and they become competent in those other tasks, whether it's integrator or sales seat or operations seat or finance seat. They become competent because they have to. That being said, that's never going to be their highest and best use.
100%.
So what a lot of times when I come into a leadership team and I'm seeing kind of the leadership table dynamics, the CEO or visionary is not letting go of the vine. Mm-hmm. They're not letting go and saying, okay, this person is actually way better at this task than me. Yeah. Because either their ego gets in the way, or they haven't spent the time to develop that person to be better than them at that. Yeah. So I sit in two seats right now, the sales seat and the visionary seat, because I've gone from a 250 person company where I was controller, visionary, all that, and I had an integrator, and I only had to sit in one seat. Now I'm a small company of 3, and I sit in the visionary seat and the sales seat. Well, in the sales seat, I report to the integrator, even though I'm the one cutting the checks.
Right. Yep.
In
you
that
have different
function,
hats. You have different hats you got to wear.
But my role now is, okay, my visionary thinking is, I got to fire myself from that seat soon, so that I can just be visionary. And that's what any visionary entrepreneur needs to. If you're in multiple seats, you need to think like, oh, I need to fire myself from that seat.
So why do you think you haven't fired yourself yet from that?
It's just revenue.
Yeah. Which is usually the case with a lot of these.
Right now it's just revenue. So I was sales and marketing, hired a director of marketing, so got myself out of the marketing seat. And then Alicia is my integrator is sitting in integrator, finance, and ops. Yeah. So it's not only fire myself from the sales seat, it's also get her out of ops and finance.
So how'd you find your integrator? Because I think there's a lot of people that also, like, if it's not, I think there's a lot of people that don't necessarily, it's not that, there's a lot of people that don't want to let go, but for the people that maybe want to let go, how do you find an integrator?
That's a great question. And you're right. A lot of entrepreneurs struggle with this because they're opposite brained as us. They're exact opposite.
Yeah.
And so first of all, they're on rocketfuel.com. There's a great assessment called the Crystallizer assessment. And so in your interview process, if you're trying to look for an interview or an integrator, utilize that assessment. What you want them to score is 80% above. So I'm like a 96% visionary. Alicia is a 92% integrator.
Interesting.
So the complete opposite brain.
Do you also have a score for integrator?
It's like negligible. I don't remember what it was, but it's like
really little.
I can become competent in certain things, but visionaries, like for instance, managing and holding people accountable, I can do because I did a lot of that in the advisory world.
Yeah.
That being said, that is not my highest and best use.
Same. See, like the other thing, like when I was going through this whole thing and I was still the person hiring all the people, for me, I was again, I was so focused on, so going back to what you said about revenue, right? I knew when I started to hire people, I knew what I had to do to get me out of that seat was to get more revenue. Well, how did I get more revenue in real estate was to get more units, get my unit count up so that the assets then I had enough assets that had a high enough management fee that could pay the property management company to cover some of the salaries of who would replace me, right? So as I started to have to hire people, I was so worried about going out to acquire more deals that's how I filled my calendar, which that meant then I had very few spots in my calendar to actually interview. So then what would happen is I'd set up the one interview and it'd be one interview and done. We were hiring that person, but then I would fire really quick sometimes or whatever. But it's like that's just kind of how I rolled. So when I first started the company, there's only one person still around that's involved in our company today that was around prior to me hiring our COO in 2019. Everyone else was gone within the first 6 months to 8 months because they just weren't a fit. And probably a lot of it was obviously my fault because I put them in there and it was sink or swim and whatnot. But yeah,
no, it definitely was your fault. But that's okay.
Oh, for sure it was. I mean, everything was my fault. And I acknowledge that. But yeah, I mean,
So there's two spots. I'll give you this. There's two spots you can look for integrators that are positional. COOs and high-end executive assistants. Those two positions tend to attract the opposite brain as us. Mm-hmm. So if you have an internal high-level executive assistant or if you have an internal COO, it's likely that they're going to score higher on the integrator assessment.
Yeah, I would not have guessed high-level executive assistant.
So Alicia, my integrator, she had started in the marketing department at Northwestern. She transitioned to being the CMO's executive assistant. So think about this, she's managing not only her business life, but also her personal life. Uh-huh. So just a ton on her plate.
So you knew her before you started this?
I got introduced to her right after COVID. Gotcha. Or not, it was in the middle of COVID. It was 2020-ish. She's locked in her apartment in New York City because Northwestern not only has the Milwaukee office, their marketing and planning department was actually in New York City. And so she was locked in her apartment during COVID. She's from Madison originally. A guy that I had hired to do some marketing work for me knew her and introduced us. He goes, "Josh, I know what you're looking for. I think this is the person."
Okay, so where do you go find an executive assistant?
So, job posting, first of all. And then I would also look at LinkedIn and other areas. Now, there are companies like headhunting firms that do really well with looking for EOS has blown up across the entrepreneurial space.
Yeah, you hear about it a lot.
And so I have a great headhunting company out of Michigan. And anytime and they've done, it's not just integrator work. They're finding one of my clients, franchisees right now. They're finding, a bunch of different things. But they're really good and know exactly what they're looking for. And by the way, if they talk to you and say, hey, you don't even have an HR process, you don't have an interview process, you don't have these documents in place, let's start there before we go and try and find you someone and end up like in your situation where you've hired too quick and you had to fire them really fast.
For sure.
Because they don't want you to spend a bunch of money on the headhunting fee if you don't even have systems and processes for hiring and developing and all that different stuff put in place. So there's a LinkedIn, I mean, you can find executive assistants from bigger companies that may be burnt out with the work that they've done. You can look at some Fortune 500 companies where they've served that C-suite level, so they know a wide breadth of things. Yeah. And they may be burnt out. You can go there. Because then they come into a company of, say, 20 people, and they're like, oh, wow, this is way easier than dealing with some arrogant CMO or CEO.
Well, that's what, our management companies really found, like with what we're building here, we've attracted some really high level talent. A couple of people I think kind of even went backwards from where they're at from a pay standpoint or whatever, but because they see the vision of what's going on here. And then also just, our VPs, we have 3 people right now that qualify to receive equity in every deal we do. It's our CEO and our 3 VPs. So we actually just hired a VP from out near Seattle who worked for another real estate company, third-party property manager, and oversaw like 25,000 units for that company. He came here, took a huge pay cut. Like I'm talking like 50%, but again, he sees what he can get in the equity play of here, because we don't do any third party. We own all the stuff that we manage, right? So, there's also a lot of changes that we're trying to make in property management that he was trying to make in that company. But in that company being third party management, if budgets change, all that stuff, you have to go to each individual owner to get the okay. Well, here you just got to go to me, one person, and I'm usually like, let's roll, let's fucking roll. Like if it doesn't work, we can drive, we can adapt and whatever. And so it's pretty cool to see, like what you were saying, of some people kind of come into a smaller company or whatever.
And we took it slow. It was a 6-month hiring process. Yeah. And because we were reading books together, we were getting to know each other. She had to transition from New York City back to Madison. Yeah. And it was really casting that vision. Now, what's crazy is she was with me for less than a year before all the shit went down. And when I figured out my next vision, I'm like,
she joined you prior to even, I got it. Okay, and then she rolled with you, decided to roll with you.
And so she was with them for a while as I'm figuring out my next steps, and I figure out what my next steps are going to be. And she started coming out with me on the hunt for 80 to 100 acres. And I cast a new vision for her and said, I need you to help this come to life.
So how many different products do you guys have as far as your mentorship, coaching, masterminds?
So I speak nationally, keynotes for leadership, mindset, different things, sales, recruiting, stuff of that nature, whatever. I always go in with, I don't have a canned speech. So I'm finding out, what does the organizer, what does the leader need? Is there a message that you've been beating the drum on that I can help you with, stuff of that nature? So I'll go in with a customized message versus these canned speakers out there, which no problem. Some of them are phenomenal. Yeah. That's just not my style. So there's that. The leadership team coaching, sometimes group coaching for teams. EOS is one lane, another lane. And then the masterminds and one-on-one coaching.
Gotcha. So mastermind, do you have multiple masterminds?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I started one to just kick off on a couple of my interests, and it's actually become very popular now. It's called Book and Bourbon Club.
Well, I see Dennis post that all the time.
Yeah, Dennis has been part of that since the inception.
Yeah.
And it's been great because I just posted and was like one of those ideas that just throw it out there and see
Books
if it
and
works.
Bourbon?
Yeah. This is 2 things I liked.
Yeah.
I have a deep passion for self-development and bourbon.
Yeah.
I love cigars as well, so that's part of it. But and I don't drink much anymore, but I over COVID compiled a huge bourbon collection. And so I started just doing samplers in the boxes along with the books, and we just created this community. And I started 2 of them at the time. One was local to Madison, so local business owners, and then one was national, because when I put it out on social media, I got a bunch of national interest, like Dennis, who's out in California. Yeah. And so I had 2 different groups, and then I had them out to the farm, and they all got along so well. I was like, we're merging.
Cool.
We're going to one group. So some people are still local, but we do it all virtually. So no matter if someone's in California or if you're on the road traveling, you can be part of it. And now we're about to launch group 2 because I want to keep them intimate enough, so 25 or less.
I see.
And then we're about to launch group 2 for that. And it's just been really fun to see that come to fruition. Then I have the financial advisor mastermind that's become a really big pet project of mine, because there's really only 2 major companies that train and develop people. The rest of them are letting their people go develop and find coaches and do all that on their own. And so we're going to bring out a product to the market that's actually coursework to help them live a more integrated life.
Got it.
Because advisors, much like entrepreneurs, just burn themselves out.
Yeah.
Just grind.
I just noticed something that I say a lot about this. People are trying to find a work-life balance. I always talk about integration as well. What's your definition, though, of the integration that you just mentioned?
It's more about harmony. Right. So when people talk about work-life balance, and the reason so many people roll their eyes or shake their head is because balance indicates 50-50. Right. And there's 0 times in our life that we will strike a 50-50 day.
Amen. Dude, I couldn't agree more.
So
you get frustrated as hell trying to be balanced.
Yes. And then when people toss that term
and maybe
out
me
there,
and you understand balance incorrectly and not understand what all these people mean by balance. But like anytime I've tried to find balance, I feel miserable.
When you look up
like
the definition, it indicates 50-50 equilibrium, right? It's 50-50, like those the weight scale that has the gold plates on it,
yeah.
right? Like, and it's a perfectly balanced. So that's what people think of in their minds. So a integrated or harmonious life is being able to integrate whatever you believe. If you believe in God like I do, then spiritually, being able to be physically fit like you and I, and I don't just count physically fit; it's mentally and emotionally along with that. And taking the time to actually work inward is a big passion of mine. It's like, because I've had people take their own lives that have been very close to me. I've had people that are struggling, because I've watched advisors and entrepreneurs burn themselves out, where they're divorced, they have estranged relationships with their kids, all this different stuff. Is like, no, we got to focus on all the things that matter, because when I lost everything, or I thought I lost everything, thankfully my family was still there. And it made me realize that all the trophies that came from my office, all the boxes that showed up, all those trophies, all those accolades, all the percentage growths that we had in every year, and all the different things, none of it mattered. I can't take any of that with me to heaven. So what did matter? My family, my relationships, all the people that I impacted in my tenure at that firm, all those things, those texts that I got, those calls that I got, and those letters that I got, those things mattered. So the relationships really matter. So we end up burning ourselves out just working to no end and not end up actually focusing on things that matter. So I focus a ton on balance being, if I work from, say, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., like a typical entrepreneur, early to later, and that may be even short for some. But even so, like you have kids, I have kids. My kids are all school age right now. They get up around 6:30, and they're gone by 7:30. So I may have an hour in the morning. All my girls are in dance, which is Monday through Thursday every single night, and then Cam's in sports, and he's 7, so it's sporadic.
Yeah.
Let's just take the girls, for example. 2 nights a week, they don't get home till 9 p.m. So I literally have 20 to 30 minutes before they're in bed, plus that hour in the morning. So I have an hour and a half with them on a weekday.
Yeah, it's like 4%, 6% of the day.
Right. Is that balanced?
No way, no.
It's not balanced as a 50-50, but it's about that quality time that I'm able to spend with them, and tucking them in and saying prayers with them and telling them I love them, and that quality time in that hour and a half that I actually have with them on a weekday. Yeah.
That's a similar thing as with our kid, the 2 that I have, the 11-year-old and 5-month-old, it's the same thing. Like we're trying to integrate stuff, last week, with our 5-month-old, I went and got him, and he came to a property with me and toured the property with me, right? And it happens to be like the first one he's invested in, because the first one he's around that we closed on. So we've got some stuff set up for him or whatever. But just carried him around, and I set him down. He's to the point where he can hang on to my fingers. So he went to a newly remodeled apartment, sat him down on the floor quick, and he stood up and held onto my fingers, and he's awesome. Looking around, and and like he's like contributing, like obviously he can't say a word yet, but he's got the noises that he makes, and he's like he's like making these noises to our staff and team and stuff like that. And it's like, but like the cool thing is, like, you can tell he wants to be out and doing stuff even at that age.
He wants to be with you.
Yeah, because they're if we just sit at home, he cries.
Yeah.
When we go do stuff, he's like engaged, and like you can just tell it's just a different kid. So it's kind of cool that, but that's a form of like me being able to knock out both and like integrate it together. And
my kids will take time coming out to the farm in the summer when they're not in school, or if they have a day off. They're like, hey, can I come to work with you? I'm like, yeah,
absolutely,
cool. Yeah. But I'll give a practical tool for your listeners. So get your want tos in your calendar before your have tos. Okay, so your want tos are, for me, dance competitions for my girls. The 2 of them play volleyball, so I got their volleyball schedule. That's done now, but next year we'll get that on the calendar. So I have the dance schedule for all the competitions really start after the first, right? So 2025. So those are all in my calendar for 2025 already. When do we want to do spring break?
Right.
Okay, spring break's in the calendar already. In case I get a speaking request or an EOS invite that's a travel client, like, nope, that week's out.
Booked. Yeah.
So get those things in your calendar first. So basketball for Cam now, flag football I was able to coach, so I had those in my calendar. All those things you get in your calendar for your workouts, get those in your calendar first. Those are part of your, now you and I think those are have tos, but a lot of people, those are want tos.
For sure.
Get those in your calendar first. Because what we find is as business owners or just type A people, you're going to get your have tos done. And that's why people are so productive. If they have a flight at 1 p.m., their morning is just jam-packed, getting so much shit done at home or at the office. And they're like, man, that was a productive half of the day. Why don't I do that every day?
Force yourself to.
Yeah, you force yourself to do it by compressing the time.
Yeah.
So what we don't do, if we put our have tos in first, we'll inherently schedule over our want tos.
Yeah.
And then you get the crap from your spouse, and then you get the crap from your kids, like, Dad, I wish you were there. And that's what you don't want, because then you get that guilt and shame, and you end up in a spiral, because you're sitting there going, well, I'm trying to provide for you. I'm trying to build something that nothing's ever been built before. I'm trying to provide a lifestyle for you that, I didn't have as a kid. And you start putting that out there, and all of a sudden you're feeling guilt and shame, and then your spouse is back at like, why aren't you there? Why aren't you prioritizing it? Like, your kids need you.
Yeah.
And so I've seen the dynamics play at all times. So I try to give people practical things to make sure that they can actually integrate both ways.
How old's your son?
He's 7, so it's 13, 11, 9, 7.
So you coach his football team?
Yeah.
Nice. How are you as a coach?
So interestingly enough, so I'm a great coach, but not to him, right? Because it's Dad.
Yeah.
So I coached with Sharif Chambliss this year, assistant men's basketball coach.
Okay.
Sharif and I have known each other since he played basketball at UW.
Assistant men's basketball coach
at UW.
Okay.
Yeah. And his son was on the team as well. And anytime, it was interesting, I said, so his son and my son are on the team. So anytime we need to tell our kids something, I'd be like, hey, Reef, tell Cam this.
Yeah.
And then he'd be like, hey, Josh, tell Kellen this.
Yeah.
And, so it was one of those things where we would just play off each other. They don't hear it as well from Dad at this age anyhow.
Yeah.
Maybe they will when they're teenagers and stuff, because you and I both played college football, and they may go, oh, Dad might know a little bit of what he was talking about, right?
Yeah.
But at this point, it's like, hey, solicit one of your helpers or your other coaches to give the message to the son.
What's your whoop app say during the games, practices?
It wasn't actually that high. I mean, 7-year-old flag football, I'll tell you, is like just herding cats. And it's just like, I'm sitting there asking Reef, I'm like, hey, at what point do we tell some of these kids that they're not going to play? Like, they're not going to get the ball because they suck.
U12 soccer with the 11-year-olds that we have, my heart rate is up there during the games. I'm like, let's go. I'm like into it. But I mean, it goes back to, like, obviously I'm competitive, but and our girls are really competitive too. They're like into it. But more than anything, I think the coolest thing is to be able to, a lot of the principles that you can teach the kids that have helped you become successful and have helped me become successful about accountability, responsibility, respect, right? I mean, work ethic, attitude. I mean, and when we sit there and we talk a lot about that during our practices, and that's what I'm like most excited about, is when you see them like turn a corner with some of those things. And right now they're applying it towards soccer, but to then also get them to understand, look, you can do the same thing with schoolwork. You can do the same thing with whatever it is you want to do in life later. And you might not have, being 11 years old, they have no idea really, but it's like, if you can try to start to, for some of them, it's kind of breaking a mold. They might not get that support, or they might not be able to think the way that I'm trying to teach them to think about themselves and what they're doing. But it's like, look, you can accomplish anything you want to do, and here's kind of how you go about it. Here's the mindset it takes. Here's the work ethic that it takes. Here's the attitude that you got to have, right? And so that's what I'm even if just one of those girls takes that into their life like forever, that's like so worth it. And obviously my daughter being on the team is huge. So
that soccer example, none of my kids like soccer, but 3 of the 4 tried it. And they wanted to quit halfway. And I said, I've had this one rule for them with any sport, is if you start it, you finish
the season.
I was like, I don't care if you hate it. It's like, you're going to play because you signed up for it. We don't quit.
You got to finish. Yep.
You can quit after the season.
You can decide later that you don't want to do it, but when you once you've committed, you've committed.
Because if you build a habit of quitting, you will quit the rest of your life.
Yep. And I mean, sometimes it's good to, there's things that I've given up on that were a good thing that I gave up on it, but I was also at the stage where I understood the difference between quitting and just walking away from something too early for the wrong reason, right? And I think a lot of times in this world, and a lot of times with kids, they want to just quit just because I don't want to go to practice today. Then they get to practice, they're jacked. They don't want practice then. Like we'll have that sometimes where some of the kids are like, I don't want to practice. They'll show up. I don't want to practice then. I'm like, oh, you want to play in the game? Yeah. I'm like, you got to practice.
Yeah.
Then you flash forward an hour and a half later with everything that we're doing in practice and everything. They're like, how much time is left in practice? We don't want it to end. Let's keep going. And we're like out there with, and we're 10 minutes over or whatever. And the parents are like honking their horns at us. But, so it's cool to be able to see some of those principles those shine through. And I have a blast with it. I don't know, about you and all that stuff, but I have an absolute blast coaching and trying to pass some of that stuff down.
It reminds you of being out there again. Mm-hmm. I don't know about you, but I still struggle going to high school or even going back to Whitewater. I haven't been back to Whitewater to watch a football game because I still get that itch.
Yeah, you want to play.
At UW at the games, stuff of that. Now, I was fortunate in high school to play on Camp Randall's turf a couple times.
State or just one of those regular season games?
One of each. Okay. So one was Badger Classic, one was state. But
which high school did you go to?
Verona.
Okay.
But going back to a high school game, I remember being because my brothers are all younger than me, going back to their games, like the first sound of the crack of the helmets, the smell of the grass, all that stuff. I'm like,
you smell the pads,
I still want to be out there.
Yeah, yep.
And it's just done at that point.
100%. That's awesome. Joel, anything you want to pipe in with?
A handful.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Dude.
So it's so funny that you brought all that stuff up today. Last week, Friday, we just got done reading Traction.
Did you?
I'm 2/3 of the way through Rocket Fuel. And so our whole company is kind of in this 2024 was that same shift for us.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reorganizing, understanding kind of the roles of visionary versus integrator versus operator, how everyone functions in that space, utilizing everybody's strengths, and identifying the fact that it's not only okay, it's necessary that you function in your space.
Yeah.
And you don't expect this guy to do this thing because it's never going to work. For you, what I'm fascinated about is at what point in your career was that light bulb moment of, like I get that I'm wired this way, but society, school, everything teaches you to work. Work. Nobody teaches you to think. Nobody teaches you to you can have success by being the one who just thinks and then helps bring in the right talent to fulfill what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Like at what point in your career was that light bulb moment that you kind of shifted that thought process?
So I'm not sure that it was a singular moment. So I was fortunate in my career that I've always leaned into, and maybe it was football, but I've always leaned into coaching. And so I've always had a coach myself. And to this day, I have 2 coaches right now. And so it's always interesting. People are like, you're a coach that has a coach. I was like, in fact, if your coach doesn't have a coach, you should fire that person right now because that means they're not looking to get better. But I've always been into coaching, reading self-development, stuff of that nature, much like Justin has. And so I've done a lot of personality exams, so I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses very well. But then when my top advisor handed me Traction, and then I subsequently read Rocket Fuel as well.
By Gino Wickman?
Gino Wickman.
Yeah. And Rocket Fuel's the second one?
Yeah. Okay. And then there's several other books, but those
you
are the
gave
2
me Rocket
main
Fuel.
ones.
I haven't got it yet.
Yeah.
I haven't read it yet.
So I started looking around if there was a singular moment, I started looking around my leadership table and I said, dang, they all think like me. And that's not a bad thing because they were all still doing advisory work as well as being leaders in the firm. So they had to be that visionary type for their clients and for themselves to propel their practices. But it was a light bulb moment to go, no wonder we talk about a lot of great ideas and none of them come to fruition. So I'll give you the classic example of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. So Steve Jobs was the visionary, Woz was the integrator. But if anyone remembers Jobs' story going backwards, he got fired originally from Apple. He was trying to be the visionary and the integrator. He's a classic. If he took the crystallizer assessment, he'd probably be 9900% visionary. That's who he is. So the reason he got called an asshole is because when a visionary steps into an integrator seat and they're not good, it's not their unique skill set to be a manager or hold people accountable, they come off a lot of times as an asshole.
Yeah, I'm an asshole.
Right? So you don't mean to, but it's not your skill set to manage or hold people accountable. Yeah. So you're acting outside your norm. You can be somewhat competent at it, but it's not your unique ability.
Yeah.
And so that's part of the big reason that he got fired. When he came back, Woz is now there. And so they had the idea for not only the iPod, but the iPad and the iPhone and several other things at the exact same time. Woz was the one that says, we're doing the iPod first, and this is why, da-da-da-da-da-da. And in that role, Jobs now had enough respect for Woz and is like, okay, we're going on. So I'll tell leadership teams a lot because the visionary may be the sole owner, but then they built out this amazing leadership team underneath them. And churches and charitable organizations use this framework. So I was talking to my kids' school's pastor. The church and the school are kind of the same, kind of different. And he was asking me the question. They're looking to hire an integrator right now. And I said, hey, I just want to warn you on something. If there's a tie on the leadership team, who's the tie go to?
Visionary.
The integrator. Why do you think that is?
He's got the fortitude to not get wrapped up in the emotion.
Yeah, that's part of it. But also because if the integrator's the one meeting with the sales seat, the marketing seat, the ops seat, the finance seat, and the visionary's only meeting with the integrator also has the view of everything that's going on in the organization. And so they go, okay, that's a great idea, Mr. Jobs. However, if we do that right now, this is going to fall apart over here, or this person's going to quit because they become overworked, or like this, and this. So the tie always goes to the integrator because they have the best view of what's going on underneath and inside the organization, whereas the visionary is just going to come up with big idea, and keep going with it. Like, we're always going to have great ideas to move the company forward and continue to expand. The integrator's job is to be the brakes to the visionary's gas in the appropriate moments to say, that's a great idea, we should do that 6 months from now. Because if we do it now, this is going to fall apart, or we're going to lose this key person because of the overwork.
It makes sense. I as you say that, I have flashback, over the last 5-6 years of this exact conversation of our CEO and me having a conversation, and then her being like, well, wait, but what about this? And then it's like, oh, that makes sense. And we kind of, now I wouldn't say that's with everything, but a lot of it comes down to what you just said. The tie kind of goes. And when you asked the question, I didn't really know. Joel kind of went out on a limb there. I don't. But then as you say that, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, and I can actually again see it in our own company when I've kind of given up on a couple things to our quote unquote integrator because of exactly what you just said.
They know more.
Yeah.
They just do. And so the point is then to get the ego out of the way, right? Because it'd be like, if you're the sole owner, it'd be like, I'm the one that cuts the checks. Like, you just do what I say. But you got to get that ego out of the way, because if you don't, then you lose great people. Your main core line of business falls apart because you're chasing this unicorn over here or whatever it may be.
No, it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. How do you balance... And it's so fascinating that you kind of have dealt with this, but how do you balance someone who is kind of that strong, visionary, entrepreneur person within your organization versus, and again, you might have very similar ideas of where you think you should go via the marketplace or whatever, but like, how do you harness that person's skill sets? Because again, like you said, it's a lot of the same skill sets. Mm-hmm. How do you harness that in a way that allows them to grow and develop and not
Joel, harness who? Harness which one?
Entrepreneurs.
Yeah, your entrepreneur, visionary person who's kind of geared the same way, but who isn't the person who maybe, like we kind of talked about this before. He's geared more along the lines of, I want to come on board with someone, and now we can snowball, and now they're rolling off of that. To where you're not clashing.
Yep. So I had several of these when I had the large financial firm, because they, again, thought like I did. And so there's two answers here, really. One is give them a seat at the table if they're ready for it. And if they're not, creating a professional development plan to get them ready for it. But if they're have a seat at the table, then it's a more collaborative approach instead of a directive approach. Because a visionary person like that's highly motivated, let's say it's a great salesperson. A lot of times the sales seat can transition to the visionary seat because they think very similarly. And giving them a seat at the table, earning that spot to have more collaborative approach so that they're a part of the decision. Because what I found is if they hear everyone, even though the idea may go against them this time, or the decision, I should say, goes against their idea this time, at least they felt a part of it. And for those that are a part of the plan, they don't fight the plan. Those that aren't part of the plan will fight it all the time. And then the second part of that answer is sometimes they get so good that you kick yourself out of the visionary seat. So what you won't read in the books, and it's kind of EOS 2.0, is there's an owner's box. So we can't use the Packers in this example. Let's use the Patriots. right? Because everyone owns the Packers, right? You're probably an owner of the Packers.
Yeah, I'm a shareholder.
Yeah, so you're a shareholder. So we can't use them as this example. So let's use the Patriots. So Robert Kraft is in the owner's box. He hires.
Notice how he doesn't want to talk about the Bears right now.
Well,
anyway.
Because the owner's box of the Bears sucks. We want McCaskey to sell the team, so we'll use Kraft because they were a winning organization for many years. So Kraft's in the owner's box. He hires Belichick to make the key hires for those decisions. So now Belichick's really the visionary. Kraft is in the owner's box where it could be, you could see in that owner's box being a board of directors or just that entrepreneur that's like, hey, I built a great visionary underneath me now. I'm going to let them take over and I'm going to sit up here and do what I do best, come up with big ideas to drive the company. But at the end of the day, this leadership team that I built now, it's off my plate. They're running the company. They're running the show. And I'm just cashing checks. I mean, Robert Kraft his checks are massive. Right, but Belichick's hiring the defensive coordinator, the offensive coordinator, the special teams coordinator, and figuring out which leadership spots. So that's the evolution that I think most businesses would love to get to. They just don't take the time to develop their people to figure out, hey, I can actually elevate someone to a visionary seat. I can actually elevate someone to an integrator seat.
And the example you used, a lot of times though, you're seeing that in billion-dollar enterprises, not right. I mean, these are. But massive, I'm saying that you can get to, like, if you're running a $10 million company, and it's just a consistent, say, 10% growth. Yeah.
You can get to a point if you do a great job of developing your people.
Right.
And think about this: if it's a 60-year-old contractor. How awesome would it be for that contractor not to have to get in the weeds, not have to go and visit these project builds, and just sit in the owner's box and take all the stress off their plate to deal with, big stuff and let them go do what they do great. And then he can work on the succession plan and all that different stuff as he sails off into the sunset.
In the EOS systems, does it talk about anywhere getting any of those key people ownership of companies and stuff like that? Is that anything that you help with or not?
Well, I help with that just from my finance background and stuff of that nature. It's not necessarily an EOS principle, although there's many EOS implementers that'll get their SEPA designation, which I'm looking at as well, just because
The what designation?
SEPA, the Certified Exit Planning Associate.
Okay. And that's a part of EOS, or that's something?
It's a totally separate thing. It's a designation that you can get as a financial planner, as someone that brokers businesses, or EOS implementer. I mean, anyone could really get it if they wanted to know that. It's from the Exit Planning Institute.
Yeah.
And there's a whole formula thing that they go
And again,
through.
like, a lot of people don't want to give up their equity for any reason or whatever, even to employees, which is fine. But again, like, how we're kind of doing it is, the employees are basically getting a portion of the upside. Right. So it's not necessarily just straight up, hey, here you go. It's basically a portion of the upside. Like, the people that are putting their money in are still getting their money out and getting a return and all this stuff. But then, the employees are so it's really for them performing and doing their jobs.
And you can do
overall.
that through an ESOP as well.
Yeah.
Like there's many companies that'll transition to an ESOP, especially if you think about generational wealth and generational businesses. Most businesses that are generational fail after the second generation. And the biggest reason is, I was down in bourbon country, down in Kentucky, and it was interesting listening. Like, the history down there is so rich. And really I love the listening to the stories there more than wine country. But the Jim Beam family got so big, there were so many kids, there was only so many seats at the table. And grandkids, that like the family just kept expanding. So the Beam family has influence in almost every other distillery.
Right. Yeah.
So
I've read that.
Parker Beam went over to Heaven Hill, and that's where they created the line Parker's Heritage, which is some of the most fantastic bourbon, in my personal opinion, out there. But that's in the Heaven Hill distillery family because Parker didn't get a seat at the table at the Beam distillery. He found a spot over at Heaven Hill. And that happens in those generational, like, the families get so big and kids get so entitled to this wealth that it doesn't go on. So a lot of smart generational businesses are creating ESOPs so that the best employees have that opportunity, not just the family members.
Well, a big one around here, Woodman's, right? Yep. I mean, the grocery chain, the grocery store. I mean, they're a ESOP. I don't know how long they've been in that, but they got to be on probably that started in like the 1930s in Janesville, I think was the first location or whatever. So I mean, they're rolling on almost 100 years, right around that. So it's got to be 3 or 4 generations, whatever, that are rock and rolling there, maybe onto the early part of their 5th.
Yeah, and the family's still involved, but then the employees also have and can get seats at the table to be able to influence how that business.
But I mean, I wonder, like, again, you're talking that many years and how many descendants there are now. I wonder, like, what actual, and I don't know this. I know some of the people that actually know the family. I should actually see if I can finally get a way to get a Woodman on the podcast. But I got to take a note for that. So reach out to some people. But I wonder like what actual percentage of the family is still working in the business, right? Like it can't be that big of a percentage would be my guess. I mean, I don't know. By the time you hit 4th or 5th generation, you got to have 100 people or so. I don't know. And I mean, I wouldn't think that big of a percentage. So I think it also just helps from a standpoint of, like you said, I mean, if nobody wanted to be into the business, if you get the right people on board that can be the visionary, that can be, through an ESOP type program, I mean, that's obviously a good thing for the long,
need to know
run of the business.
The end game, right? So when I was a financial advisor, I worked with primarily business owners. And anytime I would talk to them, one of my first discovery, like I would always call it a discovery meeting, like what's going on in your world? But one of the questions that I would ask is if I were to show up here with a blank check, you don't know me from Adam, but I want to buy your business. What does that number on that check have to be? Mm-hmm. And then, doesn't matter if it's realistic or not. I just want to get a pulse on what they're thinking. Okay, so now that we've answered that, in the perfect world, your perfect world, do you sell to a family member? Do you sell to a key employee? Do you take the most money? What's your perfect world exit? So it's like knowing that end game. So for some entrepreneurs, it may be selling to PE. Right, they want the largest check, and they don't really care what happens to their employees or customers after that. They built this great thing, and they want to exit for the most amount of money. That's cool. But for those that want to have continuity, the ESOP or creating some sort of profit share might be the best path.
What if if someone doesn't know, how do you dig out? There's got to be a fair amount of people that they really have to probably think about that for a while.
We're working through this literally right now, because I'm kind of helping run the acquisitions merger side of what we're trying to put together, and our CEO founder is kind of in that like balance of, well, I really want to turn this into an ESOP and this and this and this, but then we're also going through the process of, well, okay, but if we're structuring this to make it the most valuable down the road, does ESOP makes sense?
So an ESOP can still be bought out.
Okay.
But then you got to get the shareholders to agree.
Sure.
Right. So an ESOP could still go to PE and get the large check, but you got to get the shareholders to agree, which becomes more complicated versus a single owner, right? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be an end all be all if you choose that. It's just there's going to be more chefs in the kitchen.
And is that based on a percentage game essentially?
Oh yeah. Just like if you go to C Corp and go to, stock shareholders, you got to have a majority that says, "Yep, we're open to that."
Interesting.
See, like I struggle with the end game part. I want to be able to buy an NFL team. That'd be sweet.
Well, it won't be the Packers.
So, hey, it could be. I did have a dream one time that it was hard economic times or something, and it got to the point where like the city and the team were pissed off with each other, and like someone had to come in and save them, and I did it. So I don't know. Maybe there's a situation someday, somehow, right? It never happens, right?
I'm advocating for literally anyone to buy the Bears that would do a better job than the McCaskies have done.
There's a big conflict of interest there. I had adjusted. I don't even know if you could go.
Now, I don't want to run the day to day. I want to be in the owner's box,
right?
but like, that. So that's what. But like, I really struggle with the end game question. Like, really struggle with that. Really.
Well, you're young too, so imagine you're.
But
young.
I mean, I tell people all the time, and I don't know, but like I think if someone wrote me a $1 billion check, I'm pretty sure I would just go buy more real estate tomorrow.
Really?
I think I would.
Yeah.
Because I love the acquisition. I love going and putting the deals together. I tell my wife that all the time. Like if I got this huge check, I'm pretty sure now I can go buy whatever deal I want. I think at that point it actually become more fun. Because now I'm not looking at a 64 unit, and I'm looking at potentially being able to buy something in like downtown New York City or like some crazy project, right? Now again, if someone actually hand that check to me, maybe that's different. Maybe but I don't know how much my life would actually. And again, maybe being 35 and
35
stuff like that.
plays into it, but I'll tell you this: when I bought the firm from my father, and again that was Northwestern's
I didn't
choice.
know you bought it from your dad.
Yeah, so that was Northwestern. They had to choose the successor. It happened to be me, but
Northwestern Mutual did. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And and my dad would have chose me too. I was the likely candidate, but I competed against others from across the country that wanted to throw their hat in the ring that were on my level, and they chose me. But on October 31st, he owns this great firm making tons of money. And on November 1st, it's gone. It's
from your dad.
Yeah, for him. So it's now I'm running it. And so a lot of founders or business owners really struggle with that next thing.
Yeah, I see
so
that a
the
lot
end
too.
game, right? So it is figuring out, and I coach people through this too that are towards that end, is like we got to figure. So my dad went through a little depression because he loves to hunt, loves his grandkids, but he didn't have a purpose. Like he's got
Right, you can only shoot so many deer.
He's got 250 acres up north, and he's got a lot of maintenance to do with the lake house and the other houses. But that's just hands. It's not a purpose, right? So a lot of business owners, type A driven people, really struggle with that purpose. So I would highly suggest for anyone that's contemplating selling, or even not, because if someone does show up with $1 billion check, you're like, fuck yeah, I'm out. Like you would take that check.
I'd be like, yeah, I'm out, but I'm gonna go now buy this real estate.
but my point is like you got to figure out, like, think about what would be next if there was a next. Because what you don't want to be doing is getting caught with your pants down when the tide rolls out, and you're like, okay, now what do I do? Like that literally happened to me, right? So I'm terminated, complete to my surprise.
You're basically taking a lot of risk off the table by taking some capital,
and I
take
had to
it
sit
off,
there and
then
go through the
reset.
And I could have, with the buyout that I got, I could have sailed off into the sunset for a number of years, but I would have had no purpose. And also I have young kids and I have goals and want to continue building things and impacting people. So I had to take that time not only to get over my grief, but to envision what was next. And so thankfully that negotiation did take 6 months because I got to go through all the stages of grief and figure out what was next. Had I just gotten the check on June 16th, the day I was terminated, I'd have been like, what the fuck do I do now? Like it would have been way harder. It was like, great, I got this great amount of money, but at that time I was 41. So it's just, we got to figure out and think about our next iteration, because think about Kobe. He was cut down in the prime of his second chapter, but he was in the process of writing his second chapter, which was going to be amazing.
Oh, it was on a awesome trajectory.
It was on an awesome trajectory. He gets cut down, but he had already been thinking about that stuff prior to his career in the NBA ended.
Oh, for sure.
He had these next iterations of, man, I think I want to do this. He alluded to some of the stuff in some of his interviews. And then you see him go to work on it, you're like, that's freaking awesome.
Yeah. He used athletics as a springboard, which is what I talk about all the time. I mean, he took all of that and just rolled it over.
Just a small investment in vitamin water that happened to
right. Blows up. But I think it's just really, for me, again, that the end game thing, it's tough. It's tough.
The end game of life.
What's your
is tough.
suggestion for me with the end game?
I would think about your end. So I've had a lot of coaching clients do this exercise. It's a brutal one to do, but it's really worth it. Write your own obituary.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Because we don't know when our end date's going to be.
Right.
You're young, but at the same time, a drunk driver could hit you, God forbid, today.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And so how do you want to be remembered? Right. So is it just for the real estate, or is there something else?
Right.
Like, is there something else that, because my vision because I do believe in God, maybe all your listeners don't, but my vision when I get to God is that I fulfilled all the gifts that he put into me. And so if I go there and he said, like, the words that we all want to hear as believers is, good job, good, well done, good and faithful servant. And that to me means that I used up every single drop of gift that he put in me to serve the world for others, not for me. And so whatever that is for you is like, write that obituary and figure out, okay, this is how Justin wants to be spoken about, whether it's tomorrow or 70 years from now.
Yeah.
And if there's something on that pops to mind, there might be something that's like, oh, now I have this visionary idea that creates that next chapter.
Doing that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. A little bit. I think that's also obviously to attract good talent. We started to give upside and the equity in these deals to our employees, but that's also, I think, a passion of mine is like, okay, like I want some of these other people to become multimillionaires off this stuff too. Right. Like that's kind of a passion. I think that's partly where this kind of came from as well, of getting employees on board. Right. And obviously I see how hard they work. Our VP of facilities, our VP of operations, our CEO, I see how hard they work, right? And also it's like, man, I'm excited about that, to provide that opportunity for them to recognize, that some of that upside because of the sweat and equity, the sweat equity they're putting in, basically.
Yeah,
so I think that's a part of that. I think that's a part of my purpose, is to, again, how can I, again, like in a lot of our investors that are in our deals, like obviously their project, their money with us is doing well, and all this stuff. But now to be able to impact the people that I'm with every single day, kind of more in the trenches, right? I mean, and I think that's also why I get excited about the masterminds that we do, and the accelerator that we do, and the multifamily wealth accelerator that we have, is again helping other people buy deals so that they can turn around. And I mean, we've got guys in there that went from being $60,000 in debt to now owning 12 apartments 100% outright themselves in a matter of 4 years, right? I mean, that's a huge swing in 4 years, not just for them, but potentially what it turns into for next generation, right? And they've already kind of broken like a generational curse when it comes to like money, right? So that's something that I get excited about, and I think that there's probably pieces there that there's probably more there to that, but
I think there's a lot more to that. Like I've helped countless young men and women that we recruited straight out of college or were interns for us that converted to full-time advisors, that were broke college kids that are now millionaires. Mm-hmm. Like, and have beautiful families and homes that they, 4 times the size of their parents' home that they grew up in, mm-hmm. which is amazing. And to see what they're doing with their philanthropy money and helping others, it's incredible.
Well, I think that's also why I coach too, right? I think that's why I coach my daughter's soccer team. I mean, like, I think that's part of the purpose of that's why I'll coach, Crew and my son. I'll coach him, like, because I think being able to impact, again, not just my kids, but also other kids who might maybe do or maybe don't need it, but either way, right? They're gonna get some of that, some of that flavor from me, and hopefully, again, be able to use that and use sports just like I did as a springboard into the next thing in life. So,
I always recruited athletes.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, it's to me, it's just every athlete should be crazy successful. Like every athlete that has accomplished something in sport, has the work ethic, there's no reason they shouldn't be successful in whatever it is they do after athletics. It's just so hard for some of them. It's that transition, like you said, with your dad, where he was depressed for a while. Well, some of the athletes, when they're done, I mean, and those lights are off in the stadium, they're not in the stadium anymore, in the arena. Now they're like, where do I apply this energy? And some of them apply it towards drugs, or some of them apply it towards alcohol, or some of them apply it towards just spending and blowing all their money, right? But the ones, like you talk about Kobe, right? And the ones that Alex Erickson, who played for the Badgers, mm-hmm. right? He was on he'll be in a podcast episode that drops in a week or so here. Or no, it already dropped. His already dropped. But like to hear him talk about, he's played 8 years in the NFL, and right now he's like on the cusp of, there's some teams, he's a free agent right now. There's some teams giving him a tryout and whatnot, but he's already been, like, the last couple of years, I've kind of been mentoring him, helping him like understand real estate investments a little bit more. So he's invested in a couple of deals with us, and he's also invested on his own deals. And so it's kind of cool to like, because again, the athletes that play at the highest level like that, there's no reason that any NFL player, if they can just redirect that energy, that competitiveness, that drive, that discipline that they have when they're playing, there's no reason they shouldn't be successful in whatever. It doesn't have to be business either. It's whatever it is after. There's no reason they shouldn't be successful.
Yeah, they just can't live in the glory days.
Right. And some of them don't realize that, that.
Got to write the next chapter.
Yeah.
That second act.
So yeah, no, that's a I used to laugh a little bit at people that would say, "Oh, what's your end game?" Right? I'm like, "Well, there's an end game." But as I've gotten older, it's like, well, I find it a fascinating question now. Mm-hmm. I don't find it as something that I laugh at anymore, like I did, 10 years ago when I first started. I think it's like a fascinating question that I'm like, shit, I can't really fucking answer that. Like that's hard. Like, you have to really think about that.
Well, it's one of Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is begin with the end in mind.
Which is a book that I could not get through.
It's one of my top 3.
Oh my God, dude. I could not get through that book. So boring. I've got 15 pages into it. I'm like, I cannot read this anymore. I had to put it down. I still got it. I got to pick it back up. My dad loves that book.
Yeah, it's in my top 3.
Could not freaking read it.
All of our leadership has to.
Oh my God.
We have to go through that book.
Yeah. I wanted to gouge my, now I think maybe like when I tried reading it maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I still have it. I know where it is.
You were in a busy season at that time, so So like when the student's ready,
Is it
the
a
teacher
slow
appears.
read? Like, is it a slow, challenging read? Or is it just me?
I would take a chapter at a time.
So it's slow.
It's like a study book.
It's a study.
almost.
That's the problem, I think.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing is because it's, and actually one of my other my top book of all time is Think and Grow Rich. And that's one of those books that you can really go back to and truly study and study and study. Same with 7 Habits. Because there's not books that take 20 years to write anymore. Like everyone's just trying to get it out to market.
Yeah.
Both of those books took 20 years to write. Because Napoleon Hill was researching all these different successful people. Stephen Covey was just researching success as a whole, more from like a professorial type standpoint. So yeah, it's more heady, but the principles are so spot on.
I'm just not heady enough to read that. I'll get through it at some point here. I remember picking that one up. I swear I was like not more than 30 pages in for sure, and I gave up on that one. I went to the next one on the stat.
Just don't go to 8th Habit. That book is huge.
Maybe get the Cliff Notes and start there.
Maybe. I don't know. I'll have to suck it up.
I probably
at some
have
point.
Cliff Notes from all my notes from the book.
I'll have to check
What are your top 5?
So I can give you top.
Oh, Joel's face right now, the books. He's like really into this.
Well, so I gave you Think and Grow Rich.
Yep.
Purpose-Driven Life would be in the top 3 as well.
Who's that one by?
Interesting.
Rick Warren.
Yeah.
I don't know if I know that one.
So that one you have to read over 40 days. So Rick Warren is a pastor of a mega
have to
church.
stop.
Yeah, so it's real short chapters. You want to reflect and pray on the chapter, the info that you just read. So
Are
it's
you
a
writing
40
these down
day.
over there, Joel?
Yeah, and then 7 Habits would be top 3. And then my probably 4 through 10 are kind of mixed up. How to Win Friends, Influence People's in there. I'll tell you one that jumped to my top 10. Actually, the 4 Agreements is in my top 10. And one that jumped into my top 10 this year, it was the first time I read it, was Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara.
I haven't heard that one either. That one sounds interesting.
It was a guy that was a restaurateur out in New York City and took one Park Madison or something of that nature, whatever the restaurant is out in New York City, to number 1 in the world. And his thought process, along with the chef, just the creativity, like anyone in any business could take the thought process and the creativity and the care that he put into getting them elevated to number 1. You can start getting ideas for your business and be like, okay, like, no, this is what it takes. To over deliver for your clientele.
In such a fast-paced world today, it's probably part of that book is probably about going back to and running your business like the 1930s a little bit. Right? Like very, very intentional and methodical and like going above and beyond for each individual that comes through, which you don't really see that type of touch.
No,
very much
you don't.
anymore.
But when you do, you're so blown away.
Oh, people are fucking shocked by it these days because they just never.
Even a handwritten note nowadays, when you get there, like I hate opening mail, but if I get a note from someone, I'm going to open that. So I'll give you one example from that book that was just it'll speak to the whole thing. So they created these servers to like just really go over and above for the clients, and from the meal prep to they even removed kiosks from visible sites inside the restaurant, because every restaurant you go to, like you're used to seeing a kiosk and someone typing shit in and whatever. They remove those. People are memorizing the servers are memorizing the menu instead of like having you look at it, like all these little things. But the one thing like going over and above, there's these 4 businessmen in from Germany or Europe somewhere, and Will goes to the table and says, hey, how was everything, doing the whole thing? Like, they're like, absolutely fantastic. Is there anything that you didn't, you were not able to do while you were visiting New York City? And they're like, the only thing we weren't able to do was get a street dog. And he just registered that and he continued on his conversation. He goes and tells one of the servers to go down outside, go to one of the hot dog stands, and then not only just grab the 4 hot dogs, but like had the chef like do them up a little bit, and he's like, before they left, they all had to have a street dog.
Which probably cost a total of $8. 4 minutes and $8. Yeah.
Which and they were blown away.
Yeah.
And how many people you think they told about that experience?
Every person.
Yeah.
It's probably the main thing they talk about when they're the whole trip to New York.
Unreasonable Hospitality.
I think I've heard of that one.
It's a yellow hardcover book. I read that with Book and Bourbon Club this year. So my rule with books is if 2 people that I trust and respect bring up the same title.
God, too many people have brought up the Stephen Covey book, and I
automatically buy it.
Yeah.
So
I need to get.
One that I read on my road. I think this is just one of the greatest entrepreneurial stories is Shoe Dog.
I love that. Yeah, it's a great story.
And I would listen to it because it's just such a great story. And what's crazy about it is it didn't even get to the Michael Jordan years.
Right.
I'm sitting there, I'm like looking at the title because it's on my screen in my truck. I'm like 1970, 1971, 1972. I'm like, oh, this book's like halfway done. Is it going to get to the 80s or 90s? Nope, doesn't even get there.
It only gets like late 70s, doesn't it? Maybe
I think 79 or maybe 1980.
Yeah, it's a great book, though.
But it's the story, how many trials and tribulations, how many times Nike almost went down. Like that, the storytelling in that was incredible.
Mm-hmm. It's a great book.
So I'd have to get you the rest of my top 10, but because I have so many books that I've read over the years. What I will give your listeners is this: whether you read or listen, no matter, like the information is going to soak in. So I was a college dropout. I went to Whitewater to play football. As soon as I was done playing football, I was done with school. So probably not the right reason to go to college, but I was ADD and I was undiagnosed, so I didn't know. I didn't get diagnosed till I started studying for my investment exams when I was 25. And so, but my dad handed me Think and Grow Rich and Rhinoceros Success when I dropped out of college and I started just working. And he's like, read these. I couldn't put Think and Grow Rich down. Mm-hmm. I was finally reading something for the first time that I wanted to read, not forced to read. Mm-hmm. And so I fell in love with reading because I wanted to, and I wanted to grow, and I wanted to continue moving forward. And then even more so as I became a leader, I wanted to be able to continue to grow so that I could continue to lead people better. And so that's just been a passion of mine ever since. But it never, like, people are like, oh, have you always been a reader? I was like, no, I fucking hate it. I never wanted to read Tale of Two Cities or whatever bullshit the English teacher was putting in front of me.
I never read anything in high school or middle school. I never read it. I had like a 16 score on my ACT reading comprehension because I read like a quarter of it. I'm like, I can't read this. About two frogs. Like, I'm just like going to have A, B, D, D, A. Like.
So I would say, and some people... I have friends that are dyslexic, and one of my good friends, he's an incredible businessman, and he's dyslexic. He was diagnosed early, him and his twin brother, but his disability as a child turned into a superpower as an adult because he could listen to all his investment stuff auditory. Mm-hmm. He can listen to any book auditory, and he's got it. Whereas, my ADD brain, if I listen to something auditory that's more studious like 7 Habits, my brain's over here, there, and everywhere. Yeah. So I got to read it, highlight, stuff of that nature.
And I couldn't agree more. I mean, if people are trying to get out of a funk and they're like, I can't read, like I don't have. The thing is you've just never found anything that you're passionate enough about to actually read. And you were forced a lot of things in school that you're like, this is BS. I have zero interest in this. When you actually have a want or desire to change your circumstances financially or health and wellness or whatever, you pick up a book around something like that you want to change in your life, and you pick up the right book, you're not going to put it down, and then you're going to want to start to implement.
Yeah.
Right. Well, hopefully you want to start to implement. Right. That's the biggest key. That's always what I tell people too, who are just starting, is like, don't just read to check it off. Like, hopefully you took something out of that book, even just one thing, and hopefully you can implement that. Because for me, like, I've read hundreds of books since when I started doing this in 2009, reading. And, there's a handful of books that you're right. I don't necessarily implement anything because but it somehow clicked something in my brain that still in my mind helped. Right. But as you read enough things, you got to start to implement. You got to go start to do, because if you just build up
mental constipation.
I mean, if you just,
it's a real thing, man.
People are so scared of action that, you got to find a way to go do, because just reading to read is great and all, but you're really also trying to have a better life. Like, go out and implement these things.
That's why I hated the book The Secret.
Yeah.
And first of all, I do believe in manifestation, but the thing that the Secret never got to was action.
Yeah.
It's just like, I'm just going to think about something and it's going to magically appear in my life. No, you actually have to move towards that thing.
Yeah. It's almost like they imply that that's part of it, that it's backfilled.
They imply it, but they don't actually explicitly say it.
Right,
and that's the problem, is because people will take that as gospel.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna meditate.
Yeah,
and
it's
I'm gonna think about
it's
this
definitely
thing.
got to be both, but both of them work together, no doubt. No doubt.
And that's why I started with, I believe in manifestation, but 100%. Also working towards it.
Yeah. If you just rely on just the book and you do nothing, but I don't know, it just drives me nuts too, where it's like, and this is also why, so I used to mentor people for free, and nobody would go do anything though. And I'm like, finally, all right, I've got a family now. I've got, and that's why I started charging a bigger ticket price with some of our masterminds. Cause it's like, if I'm going to also take the time to do it, I want to be able to impact in a way where it's got to hurt for them a little bit to get involved, because now they're more committed. They're going to actually go do it. I mean, I can't tell you, before I started charging stuff, and I would just any random person, it doesn't mean that I don't randomly give a tip here or there, or go through my comments and send some good stuff out every now and then, but on Instagram. But before I started charging, it was like nobody would ever do anything.
You appreciate what you pay for.
For 100%. And I would circle back 6 months later. Hey, you implement any things that we talked about? No. And they wanted more time. I'm like, dude, you don't even, there's nothing more that I can tell you. You just got to go back and do these first 3 steps that I said, and you're going to start to see an impact. And you didn't do it. And I'm like, so, it's amazing though, when people, like Shay, right, who was in here a couple weeks back on the podcast, he's like, man, when I went to your mastermind, I paid $5,000. I had $7,000 in my bank, $7,000 or $8,000 in my bank account. And you're like, dude, if you don't like it, if you're completely, I'll give you your money back. He's like, that's when I'm like, all right, I'll just do it. But him getting that $5,000 over, which is, more than 50% that was in his savings, made him commit, right? So he came to that mastermind ready to take notes, to pay attention, to go out and then implement. And he turns around, he's got 84 apartments and 2 laundromats, 3 or 4 years later, right?
That's awesome.
So
that's a success story, right there.
Yeah, but it's crazy. It's crazy how you have to somehow make it hurt a little bit for some people, otherwise they just.
My dad's always taught me that. You only appreciate what you pay for.
Yeah, and I'm the same thing. I'm the same one. Whenever I pay for something, it's like, oh shit, I need to use this thing up, or I need to implement what I learned, because but it is kind of it's just a human. The human way, I guess.
Well, you're going to treat $100,000 vehicle a little bit different than $1,000 vehicle.
Yeah, most likely.
You know what I mean? You genuinely are going to take care of it. You're going to appreciate it. You're going to.
Yeah, I'm taking that $1,000 to the wrecking, or those races where you get to wreck up a car, strap on a helmet, and go try and see who the last one standing is. That's exactly. It's a great analogy.
One thing going back to, and I think this is something that isn't talked enough about, is ADD, ADHD, and dyslexia. And I'm dyslexic, ADHD, undiagnosed, but learning and understanding the superpower that becomes in adulthood is fascinating. And if more people could just understand, for the ADD, ADHD. You can kind of squirrel really easy, but you lock onto one thing that you're genuinely interested and passionate about, you're going to learn it faster, you're going to study it harder, and you're going to get to be an expert at it faster than anybody else. Yeah. Just naturally. And then with the dyslexia, the fascinating thing about that is in adulthood, it transitions to people that can take very complex problems and approach them from such unique angles, because their brains process just information a little bit different, which is why you read words kind of jumbled up. It's the same thing with problem solving. They just see situations and can just come up with totally off the wall or unique or different concepts in how to approach a subject. I just think it's super fascinating.
Well, I can only speak to the ADD side. The biggest part of it is that we call it a disorder when it actually is a superpower.
I think it's a freaking gift.
But it is a gift.
Well, I cringe when there's other people that have kids oh yeah, he was got ADD, and they met him up with all this shit. I'm like, dude, he's bored. Let him do the shit he loves and let him dive all the way in, because
the school system's really not set up for those of us with ADD, and so the school system hasn't changed since Rockefeller funded it. Mm-hmm. And he was funding it for more employees, not for independent free thinkers that want to be entrepreneurs or change the world. Yeah. Okay, so it hasn't changed. We still sit in rows. We still follow a bell system that we go to the next class. That has been since the 1930s. Mm-hmm. We haven't changed it. But I was at this event down in Atlanta, and I'm sitting at dinner with a woman, And I actually we had been together in this thing all day, so we've gotten vulnerable and talked about my ADD. And she's sitting at dinner, she starts crying. She goes, Josh, I just want to tell you, like, my son is really struggling in school right now. And just seeing you today and seeing how successful you are, like, it gives me hope. I was like, it should give you hope. Your kid's probably a genius and he's being failed by the school system.
Yeah, for sure.
I was like, most of the entrepreneurs and at that time I was running the firm, and I was like, almost all my advisors are ADD at some level. And that's their superpower, is to be able to have a big vision, to be able to hear no and it not phase them emotionally, and to be able to do all these great things. Now, they're never going to be organized. They're never going to be able to necessarily manage a bunch of different tasks, but they have a gift to go either talk to people, to be able to see a bunch of different things and piece them together, have big ideas, change the world in different ways. And she was just overcome with emotion because she's really in the struggle because, he's failing out of school. He's being a problem in class. I was like, I was the same way.
And she's probably getting pressure from everybody and their mom to medicate him like crazy. And
all my teachers would go, Josh, you're so bright. Why don't you just try a little harder? I was like, I don't know. You keep talking about the same thing. I'm looking at that girl over there now because you're boring me. Couldn't figure it out because it wasn't a big thing at my age back in that. So I didn't know till my 20s that it was an actual diagnosis and my dopamine wasn't firing the way that everyone else does.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Couldn't agree more with that. And I cringe all the time when people are like, yeah, he's getting medicated for, like, Jesus. I'm like, kid's 6 years old. Like, you got him cooped up in a classroom all day and he wants to go chase butterflies. Let him chase the butterfly right now. Like, God dang. To pivot a little bit, I know then we'll probably wrap it up here pretty quick, but to pivot a little bit, what's this whole infinite banking thing? Because you kind of come from that bank background. I have people that pitch it to me all the time, but it's like they can't ever actually like draw it out for me. And I'm a guy that like I can draw out exactly like on my balance sheets exactly where the money's going, where it's sitting with my real estate, right? And it's like people draw this thing out and they're like, well, yeah, I mean, right now, like 50% of it will be cost, but then 50% of it will be saved up. Then you can tap into his equity, but then over time that'll grow more and more, and you can have your own bank. And I'm like, okay, but now draw it out for me. And nobody like actually just draws the whole thing out for me so I can see it on a blank slate, drawn out. Is it like?
So what's
because you're kind of out of the game. You're kind of out of the. You were in the game, right, of financial services and all this stuff.
Well, now I can even say Dave Ramsey's a moron because I don't have the licenses. I can say whatever I want, so I am a good person to ask.
Yeah. So what do you want? What's your opinion on like the whole infinite banking thing?
By the way, Dave Ramsey, listen to him on debt and credit cards and maybe a little bit of savings. As soon as he starts talking about investments and insurance, don't listen to him. Mm-hmm. So let me clarify that statement. The investments and insurance, he is a moron. The other stuff, he actually is quite bright. But on the infinite banking side, it's the concept of using cash value life insurance. So I'll speak from a 30,000
overfunded.
View. It's overfunded. Some of it's overfunded. Some of it's just base. The issue, so a lot of wealthy people utilize it, and so that's where they try and bring it down to everyone, and it's not for everyone. But if they're only life insurance salespeople that are pitching indexed life or variable life or something of that nature, and that's their only thing. Not that they can't be good, I would just question their motives. Mm-hmm. Because what I truly want and what I did and what I trained was financial advisors that would look at your whole picture and see if that piece of the puzzle actually fit in. Okay, Justin's got real estate, he may have 401k, IRAs, stuff of that nature. Does this piece of the puzzle fit into all of that? Whereas it's a lot of people that are just selling index life or something of nature in the infinite banking model are just trying to pitch you that thing. And they're not even taking into account, does this make sense to you or not? Mm-hmm. So, but from a 30,000 foot view, it's life insurance. Life insurance is taxed uniquely, whereas you're taxed on the money it's after-tax money that's going in, but it can grow tax-free. And if you borrow from it appropriately, it can come out tax-free. And I say that very carefully because if you go and cash it out, then it's going to be taxed on ordinary income. If you borrow from it appropriately and leverage it appropriately, it is tax-free. Mm-hmm. And so where people will like to use it is in a high interest rate environment because typically it has a fixed loan rate on it. So let's say that company that pitches you it may be 5%. And so let's say you're in a loan environment where you need to go get money at 10%. Well, it'd be better to utilize that money out of that policy for 5%, put that money down, and as soon as you get that money back out of your property, you can pay yourself back into that life policy. Mm-hmm. So I'll give a real simple example. My dad bought me a life insurance policy that wasn't overfunded. It was just a child whole life policy when I was 1 year old. And then when I stopped going to school, he's like, "You're going to have this bill now." And I was like, "Great, Dad, I need another bill like a hole in my head." But he showed me the in-force illustration. And he said, "This is the cash value. It's grown from age 1 to age 22. And I was like, "Oh, there's actually some good money in there, and it's producing this amount in dividends per year. Can I utilize that?" He's like, "Yes, but smartly. What are you thinking?" I was like, "Well, I have this small student loan at Whitewater. Can I pay that off?" He's like, "Yeah, just pay yourself back into this policy." And so I've leveraged my policy. I have hundreds of thousands of dollars in policies now, and they grow at. So I just have mostly whole life. Some of it is overfunded. I stayed away from variable because variable policies are, if they're structured properly, can be very good. But in my mind, as an advisor and as an investor, I was like, it's cheaper to own those funds outside of life insurance than it is inside. So if I'm going to do life insurance, I'm going to do it in whole life and get that steady Eddie return. And for my more risky investments, I'll keep that in the stock market in my IRAs and non-qualified accounts and stuff like that. But the overall premise is to become the bank to yourself. So a lot of these guys will pitch, well, you can buy a car out of this and just pay yourself back at a lower interest rate than you would a traditional financing method. Oh, you can go put this down on a house, and as soon as you get that money out of the house or equity, then pay yourself back. Mm-hmm. So instead of being beholden to a bank, they're telling you, there's like 3 different main books that are written: Become Your Own Banker, Infinite Banking, and the other one's like Power of Zero or something like that, mm-hmm. That have pitched this concept that's become popularized. I'll tell you this warnings, like the person selling it to you has to be extremely knowledgeable.
Right.
They have to structure the policy well, and you must meet with them yearly. Mm-hmm. If it's not, whole life's like set it and forget it. But a lot of these policies are structured with IUL, indexed universal life, or variable. So index is structured to the index. You can pick the S&P, you can pick whatever. And then variable are typically mutual funds held in a sub-account. So those need to be properly structured because the underlying product of it is term insurance. Mm-hmm. Term insurance prices increase over time. So you may be a young, healthy 35-year-old right now, and the term price internally in that policy is really low. But when you're 55, what do you think it's going to be?
Skyrockets.
It's going to skyrocket because the risk of you dying to the insurance company is significantly more at 55 than it is at 35. So that's why you need to be meeting with them, because internally, if the index or the mutual funds don't keep up with the rising cost of that insurance, the policy starts to eat itself alive.
Right.
And that's where
you'd have to feed it, or
So I had situations where I would have like a 72-year-old woman that calls me when I was in the financial planning game. She said, "Hey, I had this policy at such and such company. Can you take a look at it? I just got a final notice that says if I don't pay 25 grand in, it's going to implode." Ugh. I'm like, "Yeah, please send that over. I'll take a look, see what we can do." And I couldn't do anything except tell her, "Look, you weren't paid," because what they pitch to you is, "Oh, you don't have to pay for this over time. You could some years pay for it, some years not." And that's true, except for if, again, those rising costs of the insurance internally go higher than what the rate of return is, it starts eating at your cash value. So for that 72-year-old woman, she hadn't been paying into it for years because the insurance agent either died or retired or never met with her again. All she heard was, "I can stop paying into this over time." And so what the policy was doing was taking the insurance costs out of the cash value until the cash value got down to 0, which is why she got that final notice. "Hey, if you don't put 25, and by the way, the death benefit was like 25 grand. Mm-hmm. So, "Hey, if you don't put 25 grand into this, $25,000 death benefit policy is going to implode." I'm like, "You certainly don't want to do that. Like, I'm sorry, there's nothing you can do with this policy at this point." So you got to have a really knowledgeable person that you're going to meet with regularly and make sure that it's funded appropriately.
But like the right person should be able to draw the whole thing out for you, right?
Yeah. Do you want to get introduced to someone that can actually draw it out for you?
Because
I know some.
I'm curious. I think there's a 2% chance I'd do it right now, but like it's been talked about enough where I'm like, you know.
It's bounced around social media like crazy.
Yeah.
It has.
It's talked about all the time.
And that's where I say, it gives insurance people or financial planners a bad name because, again, some of those people are just selling those things because that's their main profit line. And by the way, they can work really well. But again, they have to be designed appropriately and they have to be managed appropriately with regular meetings with the client. So they're fully understanding the product, fully understanding the risks and the rewards. And then when you borrow from it, again, is the intention to always have that cash outside of it or to put it back in there? Is it to leverage against the bank? And because, by the way, I've leveraged mine not having to borrow from it, saying, hey, I got this on my balance sheet. I got $400,000 in cash value on my balance sheet. It's the safest asset that a bank can look at outside of cash. Because it's backed like by Northwestern Mutual. It's a AAA rated financial institution, $400,000. They know it's not going backwards. It's a beautiful asset to have on the balance sheet. That being said, if it's not structured appropriately and you're not keeping up with it, it can cause a lot of pain and headaches.
So yours is the ones that you have that you just said is 400,000. Is that whole life?
Yeah.
It's whole life.
Yeah, but if
so
you
how much of the cost year one when you did that, when you funded it? How
on
much
a
of the
traditional
cost,
whole
how much
life,
of it was
almost
cost?
all of the first year is cost because they're paying out underwriting, the agent, all that different stuff. You can get some overfunded whole life. And you can get some equity in there. Now, the IRS back in the 80s set up some rules that you can't overfund it too much into a traditional whole life. They created out this 7-year and by the way, the history on that is this. The banking lobbyists were stronger than the insurance lobbyists because I think it was before 83, you could put in, let's say just for example purposes, you could put in $1 million to a single premium life, and then it just rides the mutual, like the mutual company, New York Life, Northwestern Mutual, Mass Mutual, and it just rides that percentage. And there's no taxation on it, right? So the banks were losing gobs of money to the insurance companies, and they got in a fight in Washington. And then Washington basically said, okay, you can still do that, but to this limit. So there's a 7-year pay test. Otherwise, it turns into what's called a modified endowment contract, which basically has the same rules as an IRA. So again, it has to be designed appropriately. And so you can still put money into those and overfund them, but only to a point. So like my kids, for example, I have overfunded policies on them because we may use it for college, we may use it for first home, whatever it may be. However, they're structured in a way that I'm done paying for them at age 18. If we put $1 in more after that, it turns into that retirement contract.
And then what happens is basically the interest it earns is covering would then pay for the insurance going forward, or you just...
The dividends are going to, like the insurance, in a traditional whole life, the insurance costs go down over time.
Got it.
Whereas in a IUL or VUL, because it's a term product wrapped into it, the insurance costs go up over time.
Why do they go down? Why does the cost go down over time?
Because the costs are highest up front.
Got it.
On the traditional whole life. That's when the underwriting, the sales commissions, all the different stuff goes through. And when you're paying that much more into it, so think about this, like a term product for you for $500,000 is probably $30 a month. It's real cheap. Whereas a whole life to get $500,000 maybe $2,500 a month. So if an insurance company has $30,000 going into it in a year, they're going to invest that $30,000 versus $360 going in per year.
Yeah.
The insurance costs are really high on $500,000 of term where you're paying $360, where you got $30,000 for the same $500,000. They're going to invest that $30,000 and get their money over time. So in whole life, because you're paying such a higher amount, they're able to invest those dollars. And so the insurance cost goes down over time.
So essentially like your whole life is like a mortgage.
Yeah.
Where you're paying your interest up front, and then towards the end of your mortgage, you're paying more on principal than you are in.
We use that analogy a lot in because whole life is like owning a home. Term is like renting because there is an end date. It's cheaper, stuff of that nature. It is a pretty good analogy. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good.
God, I've got a shit ton of term life insurance through Northwest Mutual. God, look at that.
And some term insurance, by the way,
I have a small. So I did a 6-month internship with Northwestern Mutual in college. So I have like a $50,000 or $25,000 or $50,000, whole life. I don't know how it's set up the right way. I don't know, whatever. But, and then the rest of all my insurance is all term. I got all term stuff.
Yeah. The only problem is, Justin, is you're very successful already. You got to keep an eye on those estate tax laws.
Yeah. And we are. Yeah. Because that is a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyone that's extremely wealthy, life insurance, owning whole life insurance or a permanent type of life insurance is necessary because it pays off Uncle Sam so that you can keep the real estate or pass it down.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, right now the estate tax is set at like 13 million, maybe some change on that, maybe 13 and a half. So that means that
which I think is supposed to actually come down a little bit.
If Trump doesn't extend it, it's going to come down to 5 million, which is really bad.
He should probably. I think he would extend it.
Really, it's really because that's
insanely low.
Yeah, it's like 5 million.
Yeah,
so for instance, so at 13 million, that means between you and your spouse, you can have a combined 13 million. Anything over that is going to be taxed at 50%.
Real estate,
right? So
estate tax, yeah.
So let's say you're worth 20 million. So 13 gets to pass. Now of that 7 million, you owe Uncle Sam 3.5 million.
And then the next generation's having to scramble of, okay, where am I coming
up with this? Are we
going to
sell this asset?
Because a lot of times it might not be in cash. It could be properties, right?
Real estate is the stock market down and we got all this asset. That's where permanent life insurance really comes into play for wealthy people.
Interesting. Yeah. And we've used some irrevocable trusts for our kids and stuff like that. So we've already started being past, which that's, skipping, the generation skipping. Yeah. So we're starting to do some of that stuff and, but it's just like, I'm so skeptical of some of this stuff,
Well, I think you should be. But there's and that's the problem when you go on Google, right? You Google whole life insurance or Google annuity and you'll see, 50% bad, 50% good. What do you listen to? And the point is actually in the right situation, they're both very good. In the wrong situation, they're both very bad.
Yeah.
And it has to be, that's part of the reason I hate Dave Ramsey's insurance and investment advice. He gives it to everyone saying this is the way it should be.
What's his opinion on it? I don't even know.
So he's all term.
Oh, all term.
Right, he says all term. Yeah. And his investments are only 4 buckets.
Gotcha.
And it's just not diversified enough because we ran a study back in 08, 09. If you were a 65-year-old that listened to Dave Ramsey's investment advice, you were fucked. Yeah, your portfolio was
back in 09. You said
back in 09 in that crash.
Yeah.
You were just. You're going back to work essentially if you had listened to his advice. So it has to be more diversified than that, and it has to be individualized. And that's the reason Dave Ramsey can talk like he talked, or I can talk like this now, is because I don't hold my investment licenses. So Dave Ramsey has never passed a test to do insurance or investments.
Right.
And so the only way you can be an expert on a podcast now or on TV is to not have passed any tests or have any accreditations to do it. So Sue Zorman and him have never passed a test, yet they give all these.
Because at that point you can't openly talk?
Because we could be held liable. If when I held my licenses.
Even if you disclose it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I could be held liable because if you took my advice.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, disclaimer, I'm not giving any advice on this show.
Right.
I'm just telling you guys what's what. But it's if I was licensed still and you took my advice, you could hold me liable if that went bad for you.
Yeah.
So that's why Dave and Susie or Sue's, however she goes, they don't have any licenses.
Yeah. Interesting. Sweet. Well, that's good stuff, man. I appreciate you coming over and popping on and
it's been fun
talking a little bit, and
we covered a gamut of stuff. Right?
You want to share? Anyone that's this deep into it, you want to share where people can find you and whatnot, and we can share it too on our description.
Yeah, I got great SEO because I don't know any other Josh Kosnik, so it's at Josh Kosnik on all the social media platforms. JoshKosnik.com is my main website. We Spartan Leadership Podcast. Actually pretty similar. We're interviewing leaders, entrepreneurs, and once a month we talk shit politically. So I always give a disclaimer: as long as you can handle multiple opinions, and you're not just one way thinking, then you can handle those episodes. If not, you should probably stay away.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of fun. And then 5 Bridges, so spelled out 5bridgesfarm.com is.
Farm's phenomenal, dude. That's a sweet spot out there.
Yeah. So if you have any leadership teams or any ideas that you have that you want to utilize the property, that's what we're here for. Is I got it to share, not to hoard.
100%.
So that's the big thing. We enjoy having everyone out.
100%. Awesome, Josh. Appreciate it, man. Thank you. Thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you next time.